Hello! So last night I wrote this ramble about Google Cape, and I want to read it to you now. In summer 2011, me and 30 other 8th graders took part in a 5-week summer camp hosted by Google called the Computing and Programming Experience in San Francisco. It went by CAPE for short. CAPE's goal was to teach kids coding in a hands-on way, surrounded by the inspiring, colorful Google office in Silicon Valley. It took place during a turning point of the tech industry. Android phones and social media were just taking off with Google at the center, and the CAPE crew, around 5 adults, let us really get our hands dirty and tinker with it all. The program lasted 3 years, 2010 to 2012. Then, like many of Google's short-lived experiments, CAPE seemed to be wiped from the internet, but I'd like to bring it back to the spotlight. Why? Well, I'll get into that later. Switching gears now. For my whole adult life, I've had a love-hate relationship with the traditional education system. On one hand, I have pretty stereotypically nerdy hobbies. I love solving Rubik's Cubes, exploring mathematical shapes like Mandelbrot sets, and coding data visualizations on the computer. My proudest creations online, like Scale of the Universe and evolution simulators, aim to give people a wider perspective about the world around them. But on the other hand, I've always had an anti-authority streak, where I shout, "You can't tell me what to do," when a teacher assigns 3 hours of homework to me. My biggest regrets from high school were letting overbearing teachers control so much of my time, and my proudest moments were standing up to them. Although I recognize this mindset may be born from this misplaced overconfidence I got from getting internet famous at 12. Still, this wasn't too much of a problem when I was a child. But when I got to college, I found myself constantly flip-flopping between two sides. On one hand, I'd rant about how ridiculous my classmates' midnight screams during finals week were, like, if teachers are assigning you so much schoolwork, they push you to the point of screaming out of stress, wholly and unabashedly fuck the system. But on the other hand, when I repeatedly dropped out of school to work on YouTube, I'd always realize after a few months, I can't help but love school. Oh, to be on Stanford campus and stroll around their historic halls amongst the coolest of classmates innovating at the peak of every academic field, the conversations, the dorm parties, the faculty nights. How could I not come sprinting back to this place of unbridled innovation and opportunity? So if I found myself every time at school ranting that I should leave, and every time not at school lamenting that I should go back, were my criticisms really valid then? Or was I just a madman who always complained for the sake of complaining, like a rebel without a cause? More precisely, someone who always saw the grass as greener on the other side. If I really had an accurate vision for how to improve a broken education system, then wasn't it really embarrassing that I couldn't point to a single moment in my educational life that I thought went right? And that's where Google Cape comes in. I don't want to glaze one experience too much, but I really think Google Cape brought together all the elements of learning that I like, while not having the elements I don't. Specifically, it provided inspiration and opportunity, structure and guidance, and the freedom to explore. 1. Inspiration and opportunity. So here's the thing about being a creator, as much as I dislike that word. No creative ideas come out of thin air. My projects were inspired by CDK 007's evolution simulators from 2007, as well as the visualizations from high school biology homework that I thought I could expand on. So, when teachers hear me rant about how I want to drop out and how I make enough money to live on my own, they might think, "You think you're hot shit? You think you don't need school? Fine, leave. Now let's see you succeed on your own, huh?" Well, I didn't want to be told what homework to do, but I fully recognize that I can't build a repertoire on my own. living in Los Angeles without any mentor figures in 2017 was a creative and intellectual struggle. So, reflecting on Google Cape, it's impressive how many role models they did let us interact with. I remember they sat us down at a boardroom meeting style hall to chat with Guido van Rossum, the creator of Python, and later Stuart Feldman, the creator of Make, related to C, the programming language. Aren't those impressive resumes? I definitely took those experiences for granted at the time, and I now realize how rare stuff like that is once you become an adult. So when I say Google Cape provided inspiration, I mean that it's inspiring to hear these people tell their real-life stories and struggles, and you can ask them questions and envision how to guide your own life to follow in their footsteps. And when I say Google Cape provided opportunities, well, the odds that you strike up friendships with cool people, and maybe they blossom into collaborations down the road, is magnitudes greater if you get to meet them in person than if you're just an online stranger. No 14-year-old, or even adult, could meet up with such high-caliber people on their own, so we need some institution like Google or Stanford to make that happen. Woody Allen once said that 90% of success in life is just showing up. But showing up alone, uninvited and unannounced, is extremely awkward and creepy. The benefit of educational systems like CAPE is that we're now students who deserve to show up, because our job here is to learn. And as an aside, inspiration also comes secondarily from just being in a cool environment. I remember the 30 of us would eat lunch in the Google cafeteria, with the San Francisco Bay, a hub of tech innovation, visible through the windows. And while we're eating, we'd do teenager shit like bottle balancing, bottle flipping hadn't gotten popular yet, or playing Bug House, a variation of chess, while dozens of actual Google employees sat around us and probably intermingled a bit. So these people are like 10 plus years older than us. Just feeling like you're in a place where others are doing cool shit can give you that energy boost to start a new project that would otherwise feel intimidating. It's like the activation energy of a chemical reaction. You might know it's worth doing in the long run, but it takes an outside surge of energy to really get you started. 2. Structure and guidance. Schools of all levels provide structure, like a curriculum of what you're going to learn and when, that you often take for granted. But once you leave school, it's all too easy to become a couch potato and let the days blur into months of stagnation. What I find ironic is that we all know that humans, our species, won out as Earth's top species by communicating our shared knowledge. But after you graduate college in the modern world, everybody is sort of expected to learn by staking their own path. Think in-person Spanish classes evolving into Duolingo, or in-person PE transforming into trying to keep up your daily jogging hobby. Yes, the most disciplined among us can achieve great things on their own, but more typically, humans need structure to really guide their progress. For example, I loved coding on NXT Lego Mindstorm robots. I first built them in an elementary school summer camp, but I haven't done it in 10 plus years now. Because as an adult, who has the time to buy all the parts, set them up in your living room, find all the pieces, and so on, without feeling like you're wasting time that you could otherwise dedicate to advancing your career? Well, institutions like CAPE, my high school, and Stanford provide that structure. Much to my joy, we had a LEGO Robotics Week at CAPE, where the organizers provided us with the LEGO kits, explained the rules of the maze-solving competition, and gave us a time frame where we weren't focused on anything else. And they provided consulting if we ever had questions or got stuck. Me and my friend Andrew formed a team and built an adorable robot called Galobble, who was almost able to solve the maze using a sonar distance detector, but it failed at the last turn because a reading of no wall, meaning the exit, returned a distance of -1. where code could interpret that as a really, really close wall, even closer than a wall of distance 0 if you haven't tested all your edge cases. We also made Global play an annoying 5-second melody faster and faster using an exponential function. But anyway, my point here is that, as a solo coding enthusiast, maybe there's a list of 10 subcategories of coding you want to explore, robotics being one of them. The amount of mental effort it's going to take to buy everything, schedule everything, learn everything on your own is 10 times higher than if a school structure just imposes that on you. And before you say, oh, that mental effort is now just offloaded onto the teachers, that's partially true. But I'd also respond that setting up 30 students to learn robotics is not 30 times more work than one student. Yes, it is a huge undertaking, but like economies of scale, tasks get easier per unit when you bundle them together. Think about going to the store 30 times to buy one egg, that's slow, versus buying all 30 eggs at once, fast. As for guidance, well, duh, that's what teachers do. I remember I started coding my map generator, one of my first videos on CaryKH, you can see them up here, during CAPE. But the lag would significantly increase at an arbitrary map size, like at 40 by 40 tiles, it would run at 60 frames per second, but at 45 by 45 tiles, it would be down to 12 frames per second, way worse than proportional. The teacher's aides were able to tell me, oh yeah, processing typically has a memory cap of 256 megabytes, and if your array exceeds that, it gets really slow at moving memory in and out of RAM. Change that memory cap to 1024 megabytes in your Preferences tab, and you should be good to go. So I did that, and everything magically sped up. If I didn't have the guidance of the CAPE teachers, who knows how many weeks, months, or years I could be developing games and never know that a setting exists in Preferences to increase the memory cap. I'm sure everyone is on board with this benefit of education, so no need to harp on it further. But here I've included an image showing something from Google's website itself about the structure and model of how CAPE was designed, and it shows a lot of thought was put into how all the pieces would work, which I like. Anyway, 3. CAPE also provided freedom to explore, and crucially, this is the one element I'm claiming doesn't exist in traditional education, like high school or even Stanford. When I think back to my time at studying CS at Stanford, I can only recall thousands of hours doing problem sets written by teacher's aides, where we have to go through these puzzles very contrived, one by one. Here's a useless piece of code. It runs really slow. How would you tweak it to run faster? Or as another example, here's a Jupyter notebook. We've left room for 3 lines of code that will successfully import the image set we want you to import. Can you write them? It feels very cookie cutter, very fill in the blank, and not much room for creativity. This, to me, was the most infuriating part of CS. The whole beauty of coding is that repetitive tasks can be automated by the computer with for loops, class functions, and so on, such that the humans involved only have to focus on the innovative, clever, problem-solving side of things, which should scratch your brain in a slightly different way each time, in theory. So, when I heard my CS professor say, oh yeah, I had to re-implement Excel spreadsheets during my undergrad, so I'm gonna make my 600 undergrad students do the same thing. I wanted to rip my hair out. Now you have 600 human brains all coding the exact same thing, all losing sleep fixing the same syntax bugs, just to make 599 pieces of code that are basically superfluous clones and never actually useful in the wild. Like as a consumer, why would you ever decide to use Excel clone number 637? You wouldn't. Yes, all coders do need to learn the basics, like for loops or object-oriented programming or memory allocation, whatever. But since we're the humans, the ones who are actually good at variety and out-of-the-box thinking, which computers are not, why not have us develop personalized tools based on our own interests that still take advantage of the basics so we learn by doing, not by regurgitating? And then, at the end of all those sleepless nights and turning homework in, we have 600 unique pieces of code that each have a chance of impacting the world in different ways. So that was my frustration with standard CS schooling. How did CAPE do it differently? Well, from the beginning, they gave us much more freedom to explore. Yes, they did spend hours teaching the fundamentals. We were 14, so it was kid-friendly stuff like Scratch. But within the first couple of days of using Scratch, they had us pitch ideas for unique games we wanted to develop. After all, teaching the art of the pitch was actually a big part of CAPE's curriculum to us. Learning how to speak confidently in front of a table of peers, articulating what our weekly plan was going to be, all of that was crucial. And above, I'm showing screenshots of actual CAPE 2011 pitched games above. There's this one, this one, this one, this one. Mine and my partner's was this one, and you can see how different they all look. And each one will, bring a different gaming experience to the user. I remember I pitched Hex Chess, this video here, which was a game that no other student or teacher at CAPE thought of. Hex Chess is not an original idea worldwide, someone else has already done it, but within the scope of the class, it was original, so I felt proud of it. And all the other CAPE students' games were equally unique, in a way I would have never thought of myself. Michael's, my twin brothers, was a Minecraft-inspired avoider game, and later, a modular waveform editing tool. And here's 2 photos of that. And this was only like 2 years after Minecraft was first announced, so this was quite early. Anyway, with traditional schooling, it feels like you have 4 years of hitting the books, where you aren't a big player in the public arena because you're too busy just learning the ropes. Going to school is seen as an opportunity cost of being a productive member of society, and vice versa. You pick one or the other. You don't normally have time for both. But with CAPE schooling, throughout those 5 weeks, I was unknowingly building an impressive repertoire of projects that, standing alone, were enough to be useful to the outside world, while I was learning at the same time. And what's crazy is, the time sunk into learning did not result in less output over those 5 weeks than if I hadn't gone to CAPE. It resulted in more, because of all the guidance, inspiration, and everything else I mentioned earlier. Here is an inexhaustive list of projects I started during CAPE that left a long enough impact on my life that I can still remember them today. 1. My map generator, which I already mentioned. This taught me about Perlin noise, memory caps, and 3D rendering. And these videos are still accessible on my channel if you sort by oldest, from 2011. 2. Hex Chess, as I mentioned earlier, which taught me about depth-first search, non-Cartesian grids, and a whole host of other things like how to manage 2 different players playing at once, or how to draw hexagonal grids. 3. Conway's Game of Life, which taught me about chaos theory, buffers, modular arithmetic. And by buffers, I mean when you render one world and you want to do the next iteration, you can't write the iteration onto the same world. You have to write it onto a different buffer and then transfer it when it's all done. I didn't have to read a textbook or be assigned learning about that. It just kind of arose naturally from, learning Conway's Game of Life. Anyway, 4, and this one's really pivotal, particle simulation, which taught me about piecewise functions, optimization, and array lists. And I later used it in BFDI 22, which is an episode that came out in October 2011, and you can actually watch it, right here, this tub thing. And it started by CAPE saying, and I don't have this in the script, but CAPE, the teachers would say, think of an emotion. And I just chose fear for some reason. And now try to write some code to evoke that emotion, make things that aren't human feel like they have that emotion. So I coded this particle grid where these particles, I can actually open it right now, run away from your mouse. And that is a naturally fearful response, maybe they're prey and the mouse is a predator. Run away. This was written in July 2011. And if I hit run, just give me a second. Oh, here we go. So these little dots run away from my mouse. And you can see they kind of spread around, they kind of blink, and they shake. If you notice very subtly, they're shaking the whole time, which evokes fear. Anyway, you can see this was July 11th, 2011. But more importantly, this later evolved into a fluid simulation where I added gravity and repulsive effects so that they wouldn't all combine. It's a non-compressible fluid and so on. So yeah, anyway, gravity simulation, which you can see by these 2 videos from old CarryKit H from 2012, which taught me about big O notation. It's n squared to simulate gravity naively, as well as camera movements, like how do you scroll in and out, how do you pan around, drawing glow, if the planets are really small and you want them to be more visible on a big screen, how do you do that? All of this And then, okay, yeah, Global, which is like NXT robotics, there's no pictures, taught us maze solving, wheel steering, how to debug hardware parts that move kind of unpredictably. Rube Goldberg machines, same thing, robotics, and a whole lot more that I can't remember. This was 13 and a half years ago, after all. And this is all in a 5-week period, and there wasn't a single textbook involved, and I did not feel begrudged to do any of this. I wanted to do this, I did it on my own accord. So anyway, let's move on. To flip it on its head, let me add that the freedom to explore also means the freedom to stop exploring if life gets in the way. One thing I hate about standard school is pulling all-nighters to finish large assignments, whether because it's too much work to finish in the daytime, or even just poor time management. If you ask for an extension to save your sleep schedule, teachers will tell you, it's not fair to the students who turn it in on time if I give you an extension, so no. But with CAPE, they let us show off our games to the audience at the end of the week, regardless of what level of completion it was at. When we initially pitched our concepts, the audience knew this is just a concept. Don't expect a finished product, which means anything we did make by the end of the week, even if very unfinished, was still impressive. This also means I was able to hop from project to project as my natural obsessions evolved. Instead of sinking all-nighters into finishing that map generator I mentioned earlier, I could pivot to robotics. As a result, when the 5 weeks were up, I had a wide variety of memories and learning experiences from different fields, instead of honing deep on a single project that wasn't even guaranteed to succeed. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. Most of all, though, I really wish teachers would understand that students gain nothing from pulling all-nighters. I've heard that sleep deprivation will be this generation's smoking, a real quality of life punishment, vastly incommensurate to the crime of poor time management, which is just a natural part of having an animal brain that has, impulsive sides to it. And anyway, if a person works on a project that truly interests them, their own ambitions would be enough to drive them to finish the damn thing. Not a scary deadline that comes with a 10% grade penalty, as if we are test subjects or something. It's all about positive reinforcement, ooh, I want to finish my game, versus negative reinforcement, ooh, I don't want that C on my transcript. So yeah, I deeply appreciate CAPE for not caring about finished products, grading scales, or violating students' sleep. So, those are the 3 pillars of what I wanted to talk about. That's a whole lot of words to say that I really enjoyed Google CAPE. Whereas the rest of my academic life felt like a battle, a tug of war between school versus creativity, the 5 weeks at CAPE felt like the learning was there to supplement my creativity. Also, it was so early in my life that I hadn't yet realized how mundane other stages of education could be. So the excitement that CAPE brought me about CS was an excitement I thought I would feel forever about CS. So there's an element of innocence and boundless wonder that can't really come back. Now, was CAPE perfect? No, of course not. I remember there were times I got upset with the CAPE crew. Once, they scolded me in front of the whole class for showing a new friend a BFDI episode I'd animated during class. They lectured me how I wasn't appreciating how privileged of an opportunity learning at Google was. But I felt they weren't understanding how BFDI was also a part of my learning journey, which it was. I learned so many animation techniques from doing this. I also got annoyed when they kept inviting non-coding motivational speakers who would say, I don't understand that gobbledygook you do on the computer, but I'm all about inspiring people by saying yes and. Although, I now know the value of team building and the value of bringing in non-technical people onto a technical team, like people who are into ethics, stuff like that. So that's just a naive perspective I had. I also think there was a big mismatch in coding skill levels. I remember I got some flack for signing up for a summer camp advertised to teach kids how to code when I already knew how to code, taking up someone else's spot. And so for a lot of the partner projects, I naturally ended up doing most of the coding because I had more experience, and perhaps because I was too eager and desperate to show off my abilities. What a braggart. Maybe it would have been more fitting to put all the newcomers into one class and the experienced students in another. I don't know. And lastly, CAPE lasted all day from 9 or 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., not leaving much time for leisure. So those are my nitpicks. Overall, though, these were very minor nitpicks for an experience that was otherwise life-changing. On the whole, I'm so grateful to have had the opportunity because there are only 3 years of 3 locations of around 30 students equals 270 students who ever got that. I even felt like we were an elite club, like maybe the Freemasons, for the next couple years, because we'd host these secret reunions. Those dried up by 2013 though. And so, over 13 years later, I still think of CAPE as the education that aligned closest to what I actually wanted out of education, the one that got me closest to my own personal goals. I also want to acknowledge that my ability to go to Google CAPE and Stanford are both huge privileges. I don't know how Google picked the middle schools to recruit students from, but I wouldn't be surprised if they looked at well-off schools where they thought future software engineers were likely to come from. That is a stroke of luck in my life that most people aren't lucky enough to be born into. So this wasn't exactly a fair meritocracy, and I acknowledge I benefited from that. And also, Google is a trillion-dollar corporation, whereas public schools are ideally there to help the public. As a corporation, Google's number one goal is to make profits for their shareholders. So I'm not saying we should cede all educational control to corporations. That would be awful. Who knows, in 2 years, they could pivot in a vastly different direction that would be good for ad revenue and bad for learning. In fact, I'm shocked they were so helpful and not focused on extracting money from me during that summer. Were they hoping I'd later apply to work for Google because I was so enamored? Or did they just do it out of the kindness of their hearts and wanting to do good in the world? I'm not sure. Either way, it was still a good experience. But why am I bringing this Google CAPE up now after 13 years? Well, one, I am sad there's so little trace of it online in 2024. I want the CAPE crew to receive the flowers they deserve, and maybe one day bring it back. And two, I really hope education isn't over for us when we graduate college at 22. For me, now it's been 5 years since I graduated. I know it's an ambitious goal, but I'd like to build an environment around me where I'm always learning new skills from new people. It is odd though, me and all my YouTuber friends can admit we hated a lot about school, about how homework sucked up all of our time and energy, about how teachers, the bad ones, could be cruel and power hungry. And yeah, it's odd that now that I'm free from that world, both financially and socially, I would want an element of it back in my life? Weird. But that's why CAPE is such an important case study here. It shows how education can be introduced into a person's life without breaching their sense of autonomy. Like, no, I don't want to be assigned homework to learn Python, but hell yeah, I'd love to chat with Guido, creator of Python, again. Would I want to be forced to sit in a classroom 8 hours a day with the same 30 classmates again? Well, maybe not, but I honestly think that a half day of structured learning 2 times a week would be very beneficial. I could see it counterintuitively giving me more power to be productive with the rest of my time, even though there's less of it. For example, see how many creative projects I made during CAPE's 5 weeks, even with my limited free time. It's about that inspiration, opportunity, structure and guidance, and freedom to explore that I want, no matter how old I get. I'm 27, long past typical school age. Without CAPE existing, having all 3 of these elements in an educational institution would sound like an impossible pipe dream, like it just wouldn't work with a curriculum or somehow it just would fall apart. But with CAPE, I know it's possible. I have nowhere near the means to build something like that myself. Like hell, Google is a $1 trillion company and I'm just a YouTuber. But it's nice to dream, isn't it? The end. That's the end of my ramble. And I also want to point out that the whole time through CAPE, the staff had us write in this blog. It's called Blogger, but it used to be called Blogspot. And this blog is only visible to a very select number of people who were in the CAPE crew. And the thing is, this is just proof that it actually happened. Back in 2011, we would write on here basically daily. So it's an interesting time capsule where if you click back here, there's 435 responses, and it's just us talking about will it blend? Awesome tree, or I guess we had to make trees at some point. BYOB stands for build your own blocks. Today we were working on build your own blocks. What do you think of the future of Scratch? But it's really fun to read about it and see how optimistic we were about the tech world. This is before tech cynicism really took off. But also there's a lot of 2011 culture and memes in here. Like here, I'm writing about the truth of lefts, rights, and wrongs, which turns into one of my first Carrie KH videos, just because it's funny. Anonymous person says, haha, I love the distinction between yeah, right, and yeah, right. Have you seen this? The L system. Interesting. So I don't know, someone's like giving me advice. There's talk about like, do you like waffles? Yeah, I like waffles. Do you like you know, that meme that was popular in the 2000s? There's a lot of mention of stuff like that because, you know, this is just a relic of time. Okay, I just wanted to add that we did draw trees, and the day that we drew trees and posted it to the blog, there's a lot more visual images that look kind of cool. This is mine. I actually don't remember this at all, but there's red, yellow, and green things. And I guess back in the early days of Cape, like the first week, by the way, it was Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, which is crazy. That first week has a lot more visually interesting posts. Maze Game by Jack and Anna. Like, look how fun that all looks. Like, I would want to play that. Michael and Elaine's. This is mine. A platformer made by me and Lila. There's more to the screen. Anyway, it's very good. This is... Jessica and I, Bradley, made this multi-level game. We included gravity. The objective of each level is to reach the end. You can't touch red, and some levels include enemies that chase you. There are also blocks that can push you upwards. And I just feel like the variety and creativity of Cape is really obvious here. Kurosh and Paul's car maze game. Game over, press R. So that's all in June. So this went from like mid-June to late July. So this is in the first like 1 or 2 weeks of the whole camp. As time went on, people stopped posting on this website, obviously because they stopped being part of Cape. But me and Michael continue to post on it even to this day, just as a joke, being like, who's still here 10 years later? But at some point there's like, we post pictures of like the robots, or at some point we post pictures of like, oh my God, this is Michael posting, I found a corpse tumbling around in a pile of boxes. OMG is still in the lower right. Oh, there's a Minecraft block. Oh my God, I remember that. But yeah, you can see that like Michael and I posted it as recently as 2024. But yeah, a glorious decade in review. I'm gonna have the last post of the decade, mother fluffers. It's a ghost town though. It is very much a ghost town. If you're curious, after the end of 2019, there's only 2 posts. One from April 2023 where Michael says, a post-pandemic Cape miracle. Welcome back, thank you for almost 12 years of Cape history in the making. How many lives have we saved, etc. And then this post from literally yesterday where I posted saying, testing if this Google Cape blog still works. Is this thing still running? I sure hope so. So the software that runs Blogger is still like churning on some server and serving this to me. So props to them for not shutting these things down. And that's basically it. I wish education was a bigger part of adult lives instead of just doing a career with the only goal of maximizing some corporation's revenue for shareholders. I hope you enjoyed listening to my ramble, and maybe we can take some thoughts from here and shape our actual world from it. Bye!